Liberating mathematics, going beyond the Western divide.
The quest for empire has been part of history since time immemorial. Kingdoms, empires, and regimes rise, fall, and fade into oblivion, but new would-be masters follow willingly into their wake. History is replete with the occurrences of such hegemonies, from Babylonians, Mesopotamians, Greeks, and Romans of the ancient world to the French, Spanish, British, and Portuguese of the 17th and 19th centuries, as well as the Americans and recently the Chinese of the 21st century, all sought or continue to seek dominion over much of the world's peoples and resources. Colonization, however, is not only achieved through war or armed conflict. A pervasive, effective, yet subtle means of conquering countries and territories is through benevolent proselytization in the guise of religion and education. Assimilation through education. The most effective means of conquering a population is not through the show of arms or military might. Education is a subtle and effective way of assimilation. Through schools and institutions of learning, colonial masters are able to assert control by indoctrinating the local population with their ideologies, and often with their willing capitulation. Colonizers often posit that their ideas are superior compared to those of the endemic population. Sinister as it may seem, such modus effectively sidelines local customs and belief systems until they fade into oblivion. A generation raised and steeped in colonization often unwittingly mimic the guise of their colonial overlords. Mathematics, the ingenious and subtle tool of Western colonization. Historians, cultural anthropologists, political scientists, and educationists agree that subject areas such as literature, theology, history, and other areas of study in the liberal arts and social sciences carry a pro-Western stance and flavor. Mathematics, however, is a subject that is viewed as largely neutral. In the words of Alan J. Bishop, mathematics is perceived to be universal and the least culturally loaded among all areas of study. Recent studies, however, refute this case. Mathematics, or Western mathematics, is a human construct and therefore has cultural history and consequently subject to human bias, contrary to what most academics and scientists believe. This guise of neutrality is perpetuated by Western math's abstract nature and seemingly universal mathematical truths. The poignant question that needs to be asked, however, is who determined these mathematical truths? By pondering this question, we cannot help but realize that Western math is indeed a human construct and is therefore subject to cultural influence. Mathematics, a pan-cultural phenomenon. Mathematics, in its very essence, is a way by which man makes sense and order of the world. This order is achieved by finding patterns in his surroundings and environment. It is now widely accepted that mathematics is a product of cultural technology, a lens from which different cultures and societies view and process the different phenomena that occurs around them. According to recent scholarly articles in ethnohistory and anthropology, some, if not all societies have evolved independently of each other. This can be seen in much of the societies in areas such as New Guinea and the Polynesian Islands. These groups have developed various systems by which they observe their environment. In Papua New Guinea, for example, anthropologists have identified nearly 600 counting systems and number cycles, not all of whom are base 10. Mayan astronomers, for example, have mapped celestial bodies and constellations with great accuracy. In the Philippines, researchers from the University of the Philippines, Baguio, have found a system of algebra embedded in the patterns of fabrics and music of the Kankan-A indigenous tribe. Alan Bishop, in his seminal work Western Mathematics, The Secret Weapon of Cultural Imperialism, published in 1990, gives 6 common characteristics of what can be referred to as the numerical or mathematical activities shared by these societies. These are counting, comparing and ordering discrete objects, locating, involves making sense of spatial environment, measuring, quantifying objects that cannot be counted, design, creating objects that will be integrated into their environment, playing, pastimes that involve informal rules that mirror society, and explaining, finding or discerning relationships of various phenomena that occur in their environment.
Enter ethnomathematics. Scholars have recognized that various societies have different methods or approaches in understanding natural phenomena. This is now what is known as ethnomathematics. Ethnomathematics is a more localized and specific set of mathematical ideas which may not aim to be as general nor as systematized as mainstream mathematics. Bishop further postulates that different cultures have developed different mathematical ideas akin to that of religion, language, and social relationships. Why then have earlier scholars failed to recognize this concept of mathematics being a pan-cultural phenomenon? To understand this dilemma, we must then touch on the subject of Orientalism. In this section, we will be discussing more on what is Orientalism. In 1978, Edward Said, widely considered to be the father of post-colonial studies, wrote a book entitled Orientalism. In it, Professor Said put forward a thesis that academics of the past viewed other cultures, such as those in the Middle East and East Asia, through a romanticized lens. They viewed the Orient as a place of mystery whose people are different from that of their own. This sense of otherness became the basis and justification for the colonization of the East. They rationalized that Western society is superior and that it is their moral right to rescue the heathen natives from themselves. Said went as far as to suggest that the academic research during the colonial period was driven by politics. Annexing large territories gave Western powers access to vast natural resources to generate more wealth. This is corroborated by Alan Bishop in saying that Western mathematics was one of the major reasons that buttressed the girders of Western colonial rule. He gives 3 mediating agents that cemented the drive for colonization. These are trade. Mathematical measures such as units and currency based on Western units of measure became the standard in world trade. Second, administration. Measurements in population allowed Western powers to keep track of their subjugated vassals in their various colonies. Third, but not the least, is education. The notion that Western civilization was superior through educational institutions made locals willing subjects of imperial powers. The following is a comprehensive look into what is Orientalism.
The attack came without warning, and according to a U.S. government source, told CBS News that it has Middle East terrorism written all over it.
The attack in Oklahoma City appears to have a familiar mark.
This was done with the attempt to inflict as many casualties as possible. That is a Middle Eastern trait.
The fact that it was such a powerful bomb in Oklahoma City immediately drew investigators to consider deadly parallels that all have roots in the Middle East.
ABC News has learned that the FBI has asked the U.S. military to provide up to 10 Arabic speakers to help in the investigation.
Orientalism tries to answer the question of why, when we think of the Middle East, for example, we have a preconceived notion of what kind of people live there, what they believe, how they act, even though we may never have been there or indeed even met anyone from there. More generally, Orientalism asks, how do we come to understand people, strangers, who look different to us by virtue of the color of their skin? The central argument of Orientalism is that the way we acquire this knowledge is not innocent or objective, but the end result of a process that reflects certain interests. That is, it is highly motivated. Specifically, Said argues that the way the West, Europe and the US, looks at the countries and peoples of the Middle East is through a lens that distorts the actual reality of those places and those people. He calls this lens through which we view that part of the world Orientalism, a framework that we use to understand the unfamiliar and the strange, to make the peoples of the Middle East appear different and threatening. At the heart of how this new American Orientalism operates is the threatening and demonized figure of the Islamic terrorist that is emphasized by journalists and Hollywood.
The so-called independent media in a liberal society like this, in effect, are so lazy and are controlled by interests that are commercial and political at the same time that there is no investigative reporting. It's just basically repeating the line of the government.
Only 8 days ago, I concluded a broadcast on the World Trade Center bombing by telling you what senior U.S. law enforcement officials were telling us, that the threat of Muslim extremists operating within the United States is an ongoing danger, something we'll have to live with from now on.
And repeating the lines of the people who have the most influence, for whom Islam is a useful foreign demon to turn attention away from the inequities and problems in our own society. So, as a result, the human side of the Islamic and especially Arabic world are rarely to be found. And the net result is this vacancy on the one hand, and these easy, almost automatic images of terror and violence. The situation in the popular media is basically that Muslims are really two things. One, they're villains of one sort, villains and fanatics.
I will dispatch the American people to the hell they deserve.
And B, many films end up with huge numbers of bodies, Muslim bodies, strewn all over the place, the result of Arnold Schwarzenegger or Demi Moore, Chuck Norris. Lots of films about guerrillas going in to kill Muslim terrorists. So the idea of Islam is something that to be stamped out.
Now, Said recognizes that terrorism exists as a result of the violent political situation in the Middle East. But he argues that there is a lot more going on there that is misunderstood or not seen by the peoples of the West. The result of the media's focus on one negative aspect alone means that all the peoples of the Islamic world come to be understood in the same negative and paranoid way. That is, as a threat. So that when we think of people who look like that and who come from that part of the world, we think fanatic, extreme, violent. Said argues that understanding a vast and complex region like the Middle East in this narrow way takes away from the humanity and diversity of millions of ordinary people living decent and humane lives there.
It's easy to attract attention, and certainly the media's attention, for some of the political reasons that are obvious. I mean, to discredit the Arabs, to make them seem like a threat to the West, to keep the idea around at the end of the Cold War that, you know, there are foreign devils. Otherwise, what are we doing with this gigantic military? And the result is it's very hard to find works that are sympathetic to the Arabs and Islam. Islam is seen as the enemy of Christianity, and the United States sees itself as a Christian or Judeo-Christian country in affiliation with Israel, and that Islam is the great enemy, the competitor. There's a history of that. The challenge now is the challenge. I wouldn't call it anything other than coexistence. How does one coexist with people whose religions are different, whose traditions and languages are different, but who form part of the same community or polity in the national sense? How do we accept difference without violence and hostility? And it's that attitude, I think, that we need.
leveling the playing field in mathematics. As shown in the preceding discussion on the latest body of academic research, we begin to realize that Western mathematics is just one of the methods from which we can view the world. We can also come to the realization that other mathematical systems authored by different indigenous peoples is as worthy of recognition as those of mainstream mathematics. Ethnomathematics plays an important role in making mathematical concepts more relevant to an audience to which it is taught. Like those in coastal communities, for example, math problems using distances traveled by boats or kilograms of fish is more relatable than using distances traveled by planes or pounds of exotic fruit, such as pomegranates. Ethnomathematics humanizes numerical concepts, making them more familiar than abstract forms. More importantly, ethnomathematics gives back a sense of pride and self-worth in the fact that their endemic culture is at par as those of the West. This helps people shed the shackles of colonization that imprisoned them for so long. It makes us proud of who we are as a people, and hopefully awaken our resolve for nation building and our sense of shared destiny.